Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and as always, a little bit of entertainment. This is episode 101 of the Try Talking Sport podcast, and I am so excited to bring the podcast on its next chapter with lots of fabulous interviews planned and incredible guests lined up to inspire and motivate us all over the coming weeks and months. I am loving my training routine at the moment. I have really gotten back into the swing of triathlon training. For the past couple of years, the focus of my training has been heavily weighted towards the bike, which is my favourite discipline. But I am also really enjoying being back in the pool, and getting out for a run is less of a mental hardship than it was only a few months ago. That, in my opinion, is massive progress. I have yet to sign up to any races, but am training, in inverted commas, for my trip to Lanzarote next month as part of Oliver Harkin's primed coaching gang. I really hope I don't get dropped too early on the hills, but if I do, I'll be freewheeling to the nearest coffee shop on the way home. Hopefully when I come home, I'll have a better sense of where I'm at with my fitness and training and can pick a race or two to sign up to. Last Saturday was my first outdoor gig of 2023. I emceed the RTE Operation Transformation 5k fun run in the Phoenix Park and was delighted to be invited back to the event again this year. It was such a super morning. About 5,000 people took part, many of them completing their first ever 5k walk, never mind completing a 5k run. And the buzz from early morning right through until the final finisher really was something special. It was simply brilliant to see so many people coming together to take on their 5k challenge. Congratulations to everyone who took part in the event. There are lots of events coming up over the coming weeks and months in the Phoenix Park, including the Athletics Ireland Irish Runner Series across May, June and July, and of course the Great Ireland Run, which takes place on the 16th of April. There are no shortage of events to choose from on the Try Talking Sport website, from the gravel biking events to running events, as well as a mix of triathlon, duathlon, and I think there's a couple of aquathlon events listed there too. Be sure to check them out and get your race place locked in for 2023. Now, speaking of events, I was delighted to be invited to speak with participants on the Triathlon Ireland Women in Sport Leadership Programme this week, sharing insight on my announcing career and some key ideas on effective communication. And I'm really looking forward to hosting the upcoming Nuasan webinar on Tuesday, March the 7th, with John Phelan of Life Fit Physio and Bike Fit Physio, who will share insight into the dynamics of cycling and pro tips on injury prevention. Be sure to sign up to the free event on our website, and don't forget you can get 15% discount on all Nuasan products online using the code TTS15. Now to this week's episode with Irish Olympian and world champion gymnast Rhys McClenaghan. Rhys has been blazing a trail in the sport of gymnastics since first taking up the sport as a young boy. And despite the lure of swimming and of football, he knew from an early age that gymnastics was the sport that would capture his heart and his mind. He has had huge success in the sport, and his star continues to rise as he performs intricate, technical and fast-paced routines on the pommel horse. With a trophy cabinet bursting at the seams, he was Ireland's first gymnast to win medals at European and world level, and Ireland's first gymnast to reach an Olympic final. Some of his key achievements include becoming a world champion on the pommel horse and winning a silver medal at the Commonwealth Games last year. In 2021, he competed in his first Olympic Games in Tokyo, finishing 7th in the final. Prior to that, Rhys has won bronze in the World Championships in Germany and won gold at the World Cup in Slovenia in 2019. And in 2018, he became European champion and Commonwealth champion. In 2016, as a junior gymnast, he won the first European Championship medal in history for Ireland, taking silver on the pommel horse at the Junior European Gymnastics Championship. Now based in Dublin, Rhys, along with his coach Luke Carson, have one golden goal in mind over the coming months, and that is winning gold at the 2024 Paris Olympics. At 24 years of age, Rhys is determined, committed and dedicated to his craft. His love of gymnastics and passion for success driving him to strive every single day to be the best gymnast that he can possibly be. Now, go grab a cuppa and enjoy the show. Rhys McClenaghan, thank you so much for joining me on the Try Talking Sport podcast. I'm delighted that you are here as a guest on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Rhys, it's a big change from triathletes, rowers, runners, cyclists, swimmers. We have our first elite gymnast on the show, and I'm really excited to chat with you today. You have had an incredible 2022. But before we go into talking about the year that you've had, or maybe the last couple of years that you've had, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and about your background in sport generally.
Yeah, I mean, my background in sport is that it shaped my life. I've always been a very, very active kid growing up, and I tried many sports. I'd done swimming, I'd done football, field hockey even when I was in school. But gymnastics was always just the one that stuck with me. So I made the decision at about 8 years old to take gymnastics more seriously than all of the rest of the sports, because I was having to leave gymnastics training early to go to football practice. And then I just remember saying to my mum, like, I just want to be in the gym all the time. It didn't weigh up for me going to football practice, and I just wanted to stay in that gymnastics centre.
And were you a good footballer?
I know how to kick a ball. Probably not too well now, but no, I'm not bad. I'm not bad. I dub myself as quite good at every sport that I try.
8 years. So you started gymnastics at the age of 6, and you were with Rathgale Gymnastics Club in Bangor. 2 years on, you're making the decision to ditch other sports to follow a passion for gymnastics. That's a very young age to be deciding on your future sport and sticking with it right through now.
Yeah, I mean, well, I even started gymnastics just at my local leisure centre. You know, it was as basic as that it wasn't even a dedicated gymnastics club that I went to. It was just, the standard PE equipment that had the benches, maybe like a mini trampoline. But even that basic setup was enough to make me fall in love with the sport, to just see an environment built to facilitate a crazy kid, more or less, to push the body to the limits, to push my mind to the limits and keep me active as a kid. And I couldn't think of anything better.
And could you sit still as a kid, Rhys, or were you always climbing trees and running around the place and doing things like every other kid?
No, I would definitely spend more time up a tree than I would have kicking a football or even running about the streets. I was always climbing trees. I was always playing on my garden trampoline. And I think when my mum and dad seen that, it was quite obvious what sport was really for me.
Taking up the sport then and looking beyond when you were like in your teens and carrying on into your early 20s, you've had quite a career in the sport at such a young age. Like, it's absolutely incredible to look back at all that you've achieved since you did actually start focusing on gymnastics.
Yeah, gymnastics, it turns professional very early. It takes up a lot of your life, and it becomes more of a lifestyle rather than that hobby or sport that a kid does twice a week. I was in the gym 6 days a week, training for 4 hours every day, from the age of 10. From the age of 10 onwards. So that really demonstrates how much of a part of my life gymnastics was. So it felt like I went professional very early. Of course, I was still at school. I was leaving school to drive to training straight away, getting changed in the car, doing my homework in the car. It just became a regular part of my life. But I loved it. All of those difficult days where I maybe was too tired to go to the gym and stuff, it all kind of got pushed to the side because of my love for the sport. And I feel like that is just the overarching theme of my entire gymnastics career, even to this day. The reason I'm still able to do it through difficult times is because I love to do it.
What is it about gymnastics that you absolutely love?
I think being able to push your body to the limits, being able to push your mind to the limits, you feel superhuman when you do these skills. I'm sure you've seen some of the videos of me maybe doing a double twisting, double somersault off a bar. Like, people see that and can't even comprehend it. And the feeling that you get when you're doing something that is incomprehensible like that, it makes you feel superhuman. And just the whole learning process of that when you're growing up in the sport, where, of course, you're not going to start off with a double somersault off the bar. You're going to start off with, just swinging around the bar. That's an achievement in itself. Then you start to learn how to let go of the bar, do a somersault. That's an achievement. And then you build your way up. And it's such a great representation of life and that progress of life. In the gymnastics hall, that progress is demonstrated so vividly. And that's why I fall in love with it.
During your school years, how did you get the balance right between gymnastics and your school studies? Were you as dedicated to your schoolwork as you were to your gymnastics? Were you a good student, or were you trying to get out of school early to get to the gym to go do your training?
I wish I was sitting here saying that I was as dedicated to schoolwork as I was gymnastics, but I guess that's that imbalance. I was obsessed about gymnastics and not so much so about school. And it's it probably wasn't because of my gymnastics that my schoolwork wasn't up to scratch. And I was a little bit of a messer in the classroom, but I think that was more to do with my inability to sit still and concentrate rather than actually my gymnastics. I do remember sitting in class and my mind wandering to the gymnastics hall. What routines am I thinking about doing today? Or what new skills do I want to get in gym? But I think for the most part, it was just that school was not for me. And it was very obvious throughout my entire school career that was the case. And I felt like as soon as I left school, I started to actually learn more, and I started to pick up the books. I started to research just on my own accord, and that's where I really started to learn after school.
It seems to me that when you're on the pommel, that when you're flying around on it, that it's almost like a freedom thing. It's like a massive release. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah. I mean, the whole goal of gymnastics is to make it look easy, to make it look aesthetically pleasing. And that is a product of a lot of like bad goes, failures, if you will. And it certainly isn't easy. And that whole process to get to that point certainly isn't easy. But, it's that finished product that you want to make it look effortless. You wanted to make it look like you're levitating and floating around that pommel horse without effort. But it is certainly a process to get to that point.
Talk us through how much effort it takes to become so effortless and so light and so amazing on the pommel.
Commentators like to say that I've got such a natural swing about the pommel horse, or I'm naturally gifted on this apparatus, and I would completely disagree with that altogether. If you picked out any little tiny thing, hand placement, leg form throughout that routine, I will be able to tell you exactly when we worked on that, exactly why we worked on it, and nothing came natural. Maybe my overall understanding of gymnastics in general comes a little bit natural, but everything that you see on the TV, on that routine, on the pommel horse, I could tell you exactly where I've improved on that, or what age I improved on it. That has made that final product, like at World Championships, for example.
It's such a hugely technical sport. You look at some of your routines that you do and you think like, okay, how many times did it take him to perfect that World Championship routine? You've done it many, many times before, but how many times did you get it as perfect as you did when you won the gold medal at the World Championships in November?
Quite a lot of times.
How many times did you fail?
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next point. So I've done good routines quite a lot of times, and that needs to be done, especially before you perform on the big stage. We kind of have the luxury in gymnastics of knowing what we're going to do. A boxer steps into the ring, they don't know what their opponent's going to do. So we have the luxury of being able to know what we're going to do. So it kind of comes down to a mindset where you shouldn't have to change your routine or how much effort you give into a certain routine. But outside of that, the reality is you're in this arena filled with, I know World Championships was 13,000 people. There's a panel of judges there judging your routine, judging your gymnastics. The pressure is on. So it's all about trying to take what you've done in training, what I've done in training hundreds of times. I've done that routine hundreds of times, and put it into that pressure situation. And hopefully the pressure doesn't get to you.
Why did you choose the pommel over all the other aspects of artistic gymnastics?
I was always further ahead on the pommel horse. I was always doing these skills that even the senior gymnasts could not do. Even when I was about 11 years old, I was doing some of the most difficult skills on the pommel horse. So it was obvious that was my apparatus, and I loved doing it. It was just by far my favorites. But I still done all 6 of the events in men's gymnastics right up until I was 18, and I had to get shoulder surgery. And then everything in sport moves so quickly. So the following year, I had to qualify to the Olympics, and there's a couple of routes that we can qualify. You could qualify through the all-around route, which is all six of the apparatus. And because of the shoulder surgery, that was clearly out the window. So we had to try and qualify on the pommel horse. That was going to be our main objective of the year 2019, was trying to qualify that spot to Olympics. And it was about rehab and recovering that shoulder to get back to doing a pommel routine that I could perform at the 2019 World Championships and qualify a spot to the Olympics.
And at what point did you have the Olympics on your radar? Was it from that little 6-year-old kid when he started? Was it maybe the 8, 10, 11, 12-year-old when you saw how good you were getting and the skills that you had? Or maybe was it in more recent times that the Olympics was the main goal?
I think when I was younger, I was very susceptible to having big dreams. Even when I'd done swimming, I remember before a race trying to pretend it was the Olympic Games. So that was a different sport. But as soon as I, of course, took up gymnastics and started taking gymnastics seriously, that was the same thing. When I was doing these mini competitions in-house at the gymnastics club, presenting to the coaches my routine, I was pretending it was the Olympic Games also. So, those dreams were there right the way through my gymnastics career, but I never really took it serious until I was about 16. And then that's when I was starting to do these routines that were actually contesting these senior gymnasts, these guys that were best in the world. I when I was 16, I placed on the podium behind Lewis Smith and Max Whitlock, who were at the time the two number 1 and number 2 best pommel horse workers in the world. So I think that was a little bit of a switch in my brain where I was like, okay, this is a reality now. It is literally a reality that I could go to the Olympic Games and maybe even get a medal. And that's when the belief started to pick up. And then the next couple of years, I gradually made the progressions. And then at the age of 18, 2 years later, I beat that Olympic champion.
Twice, didn't you? The Commonwealth Games and European Championships.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Crazy. I mean, it was a surprise in a way because, I was so young in my career. It was my first year in senior, but at the same time, it didn't come as a surprise. Me and my coach know that we're putting out this routine that could contest the best in the world and take gold medals at any competition I go to. So we make that decision in the training hall, and it's just about performing it on the day. So as a young me as the perspective as a young Rhys McClenaghan who just loves gymnastics, to see I'm actually beating the Olympic champion now, that's crazy. But for me right now, I'm like, no, this is where I should be.
And then in 2019, you were the first Irish gymnast to qualify for a World Championship final and win a medal, taking bronze. And you were also the first Irish gymnast to compete in a European final and first to win a European medal as well. I mean, Rhys, it seems to me like you're first, you're almost the trailblazer for every other gymnast that's coming behind you.
Yeah, and it's a very special position to be in. Every major competition I go to, I'm more or less making history for the country and for gymnastics in this country, and it's super important for young kids to see that, because I know how much I took from seeing these gymnasts, even from other countries, going and winning medals and seeing how much these moments meant to them. For an Irish gymnast to be doing that and hopefully inspiring younger Irish gymnasts and seeing that it's possible, coming from this small island, that we can take on the best in the world and dominate the sport, more or less, that must be a special thing. So I'm in a position that I do not take lightly, really. And it's certainly one of my main goals to make sure that the younger generation can come up and beat all of my achievements. I'm not going to make it easy for them. I want them to beat all my achievements. But it's an exciting time, I think, for Irish gymnastics. And
you're setting the standard very high.
Yeah, certainly. But that's what's needed. A standard switch is often what can be the trigger for success in a country. Take Jamaican sprinters. I'm sure as soon as Usain Bolt raised the bar high, there was so many more coming from under him, and that standard was just raised. And I think that's almost like a mentality switch that needs to be made from coaches, from people in Gymnastics Ireland. It's all happening. I can tell you that it is all happening, and it's an exciting time. And then you did get to the Olympics. We were heartbroken for you when we
saw what happened in the Olympics, and I know you were heartbroken yourself, but you picked yourself back up. You still finished 7th in the Olympics despite that slight technical mistake. I think it was at the second piece of the routine. Maybe talk us through what happened there. Lots of us can see how fluid and flying you are and how effortless it is on the pommel. But like the teeniest, tiniest of errors can just be game over.
Yeah, I mean, the finest of margins in this sport. And that's where I've come to learn that it's part of the sport, really. One finger placement off, had my finger just on the handle in the wrong way, and that was enough to knock me off the pommel horse. So that's the kind of pressure that we have to deal with in those moments. And they take you by surprise, certainly. But it's part of the sport. It's about switching that disappointing situation into a positive feeling, and a feeling that will bring me back into the gym the following week or the next day, and have me more hungry for success more than anything. And failure can often be an opportunity where you can take it and learn from it in the best way possible. I'm certainly learning from success as well, but I think failure you can learn from a lot more and take a lot more motivation for sure from failures.
I think what captured the imagination of the Irish people on the day was it happened so early in the routine, and you just had this composure to be able to get back up on the pommel horse and pretty much complete 95% of the routine that you should have done. And I think all of us were just like so proud of how you dealt with it in that moment, and the performance then that you put in, that you were actually able to get back up on the horse, literally.
Yeah, it's a very tough thing to fall at the very start of a routine like that, and then you're more or less having to do the routine that would have got you a medal or maybe even made you Olympic champion. If it weren't for that fall, you're pretty much restarting the routine. So it's harsh, it's difficult. I had to repeat the skill that I fell on, and I done it perfectly. But again, that's sport. That's just part of the journey. It's part of what makes gymnastics and sport exciting, because you wouldn't watch sport if you knew what's going to happen or you knew who's going to win. That's why you watch sport, for those surprises. I mean, now I have the pleasure of making everybody feel nervous when they watch me, but it just makes it exciting. It just makes it, that is a perfect showcase of gymnastics, the fact that anything can happen. But now I've made it exciting in that way. Now I'm going to make it exciting by pulling off the best routines possible.
And speaking of nervous, do you get nervous? I mean, pulling on the Irish Olympic kit to stand there in Tokyo to perform for your country on the world's biggest stage, like, were you nervous?
Yeah, although the Olympic final, I was surprisingly not nervous. So I don't know, maybe that had a part to play. Maybe I need to be more nervous, but I'd say for most competitions I feel nervous, but there's a nice balance that I like, where I feel nervous, but at the same time it feels just like training. As soon as around that 4-meter mat is unfamiliar territory. Around the pommel horse, it's 13,000 people. There's the judges, there's your competitors all lined up ready to go after you. But once I kind of enter that 4-meter mat, put my hands on the pommel horse, I'm like, yes, I'm home. And that's just the exact feeling that you want to feel.
And what's going through your head when you're doing the routine? Like, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the actual routine, or are you just in the moment and in the flow? Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, there's a bit of both. So your mind, I think, automatically wants to go to that flow state where it's just that like fight or flight mode. So you want to almost daydream, but it's a challenge to not do that, of course, because you need to focus on your points. And I feel like if there is a mistake on the pommel horse, especially, there's a lapse in focus. And it's an apparatus where each skill just comes after the other. There's no stopping during the routine, whereas like on the floor exercise, you do one tumble pass and then stop, compose yourself, go again. Pommel horse is continuous, and I think that's why you see so many falls on pommel horse. In a pommel horse final, even at World Championships, there the two guys that were up before me just fell, and it's very common. And I feel like that's the reason why it's so continuous. And if there's any lapse of focus, then you'll definitely see it.
And can I ask you a really silly question? Does it hurt when you fall off the pommel horse, or are you so used to falling off that you've got a way of falling depending on what part of the routine it is that you fall off the horse in training?
Yeah, I mean, it's
probably a really silly question.
It depends. Some people would say the pommel horse is the most dangerous apparatus because it just strikes you when you're not expecting it. Even when you're doing skills flying, 3 meters in the air doing double somersaults, you can kind of tell when a skill is off, and you can save it, maybe land on your back or something to save it. Pommel horse just strikes, and I think that's what we saw at Olympic Games with me. It just hit me and then you're off. You don't see that kind of domino effect of things going wrong. So there's people that have broke their ribs. I've broken my fingers a couple of times just because of the way that you go to try and grab the handles. So it strikes you at times you don't expect.
And can I ask as well, how do you decide what skills or what routine you're going to do? Like, just explain maybe to the listeners a little bit about that, because I think that's quite interesting as well. I know you explained in one of your YouTube videos that routine that you did in the Olympics, maybe you did that again at a World Championships and you weren't happy with it, if I'm not mistaken. And so you went back to a previous routine. So maybe just talk to us a little bit about that to educate the listeners a bit about it.
Yeah, so a routine in all apparatus and gymnastics is made up of 10 skills, and each of those skills have values. So the more difficult the skill is, the higher the value is going to be. And those are all written on what's called the Code of Points, which is more or less the gymnastics rules. So all of the registered skills are there. So it's about having that fine line of doing difficult skills, but not letting it have an effect on the execution of the routine. There's 2 scores that go into a routine: the difficulty score, which is all of those skills points added up. And then there's the execution, where the judges are looking for mistakes, legs apart, bent legs, bent arms, all of those aesthetic errors that they'll take points off. So it's finding that balance where you want to be doing the most difficult routine possible, but also doing it very, very well.
So how do you strike the balance then? Are there particular things that you're better on pommel than somebody else is, and vice versa? And so you would maybe try and go for the higher execution score on a skill like that to try and edge out the competition. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah.
Kind of way?
And it happens in a very natural way, actually, when you mention it like that. Everybody picks their own routines. Everyone could do the same routine, but they don't. They work their strengths, and that's why you get such a great variety of routines throughout all of gymnastics. And it happens very naturally in that way, which is really nice to see.
Let's talk about the World Championships in November, because it was the end of the season. It was the culmination of a great year. It was just over a year after the disappointment of Tokyo. So maybe even before we talk about the World Championships, talk about the year you had after Tokyo and then getting to the World Championship and becoming the world champion.
Yeah, you said it was a great year. I would describe it as a rough year.
Well, maybe it was a tough year, I would say. I'd say it was difficult to come back and to face what had happened in the Olympics in a mental perspective and in a self-belief and kind of confidence perspective, I imagine. And to go out and try and, I suppose, prove to the world again that you are the best in the world and potentially are the best in the world when it comes to the Olympics.
It was the redemption year, I guess.
That's the word I was looking for.
we were certainly on a path to try and redeem myself after the Olympics, after the World Championships that were in 2021 as well. That didn't go to plan. So it was a year kind of based around that, the goal is always the same. We try to go to every competition and try to win. And as I said, we make that decision in the training hall. We don't make it on the day of the competition. So that's why I'm confident enough to say that right now. So it was all about that. It was all about maybe, going through all of these 3 major championships that were this year. That was the Commonwealth Games, which we struggled to even get to. There was the European Championships and World Championships. I'll start with Commonwealth Games, where that went into political territory, which I am not familiar with at all. So
that must have been so frustrating.
Yeah, certainly. So, we were told that we weren't going to the competition right up until 2 weeks before the competition. And then we're like, okay, well, I guess we're going. We went there. There was mistakes made in my competition, but I was still able to come away with a silver medal. And that's actually a position that I've always wanted to be in, where I could make a big error in the routine and still come away with a medal. That shows that I'm really up there no matter what. but then there was the European Championships, and similar mistakes were made there actually. But the standard is much higher in Europe, so we knew that something needed to change when we were going into World Championships. So that's when we made the changes to the routine. We saw a pattern of this one skill that was just causing all of the issues, and we took that out, put in a different skill, and it seemed to work completely in training. So the build up was coming towards World Championships. We were feeling very good. I was happy, coach was happy, and we felt very, very ready. And that's when World Championships happened. We flew through qualifications, qualified into the final in first, and pretty much just performed an identical routine as I did in qualifications to finals. And that's exactly what you want to see, just that consistent gymnastics. And I feel like that consistency got me that World Championship title.
And of course, we were in the National Indoor Arena watching the final. I think it was it the National Championships or one of the events on in the arena, and you could hear a pin drop when you did that performance. How did it feel when you dismounted, knowing that you had pretty much done the perfect routine?
I felt a lot of relief. I put a lot of pressure on my shoulders. I don't really feel the pressure from the thousands watching or the people relying on these results. I feel the pressure from myself because I wanted so badly. And although you could label pressure as a negative thing, I certainly feel that pressure every single day when I go to training, and that's what pushes me every day. And to perform a routine under such circumstances like that is just a relief. As soon as your feet hit the floor from that dismount, relief goes through your body. All of those hours, all of those years even of gymnastics training have paid off in that one little tiny moment, that little 60-second routine. It pays off then and there, and it's a feeling that's quite indescribable actually, but it's certainly a feeling that I'm going to chase until the end of my gymnastics career.
It must take a huge amount of self-belief to know that you can step up and perform a routine absolutely perfectly.
Yeah. Belief was always ingrained in my upbringing. My parents always believed that I could make it to the top of sport. They always reflected that on me. So it was only inevitable that I could have belief in myself just like they have in me. So my parents had a huge part to play in that. But then also, like my coach, he has always had that belief. The first day I went to see Luke, he said to my mum, he could be the best in the world. And to have that belief at such an early point in my career, when I was only 14 years old, that's something that carries right to that moment where I'm performing a routine that does justify that I'm the best in the world.
Let's talk about you and Luke Carson for a minute, actually, because your success is dependent on his ability to train you, to get you to perform at the highest level, to see where you're making mistakes, but to encourage and support you as well to be the best in the world. That relationship must be a very special one.
It is, yeah, and we're certainly more like friends, and we have a very good dynamic in the gym. We may be friends, but he also certainly has my respect and my discipline. When I pick up my phone in the gym and he tells me off for that, I'm throwing my phone straight away down and running over to the pommel horse. So he certainly has my respect in that way, and we work very, very well as a team. We communicate well. We're both very diligent in our practices. He creates an amazing program for me every single time for the competitions, and I follow them religiously. And that's why I feel like we've had a lot of success. So we've had to demonstrate our ambition to the rest of the world, and had to be the outliers really in this sport to be able to create a nice clear pathway for the younger gymnasts to follow.
So how have you built that relationship? How have you created that friendship, that brotherhood, yet that professional aspect where when he tells you to jump, you're not asking how high, you're literally jumping?
Yeah. I guess it is just that kind of being together so long, and also just seeing what works and doesn't work. I know that the likes of the discipline aspect is very important in sport, because it takes away what I might deem difficult and might want to avoid. He's the person pushing me from the outside to be able to be like, no, you need to do these conditioned exercises. I know they're hard, but you need to do them. And I need to be like, okay, I don't want to do them, but I do them. And it's the same with the programming. Having a good coach that you can communicate with like that makes the whole process so much easier.
Are there ever days, Rhys, where you go into the gym and you're like, oh my God, I just want a break. I just don't want to train today. I don't want to do this. I just want to go for a walk or go to the cinema or just take a break. Like, how do you find your release when you don't want to do something that's gymnastics related?
The Nike phrase, just do it, is a very good one for that. But in my words, I guess a lot of people would see that in order to take action, so to go into the gym, do your workout, you need to have motivation before that. But a lot of the time, just doing the action will actually spark that motivation, and vice versa. So going to the gym, doing the difficult part of like getting in your car and driving to the gym is often enough for me to spark that motivation. As soon as I get the blood flowing around my body, even though I'm feeling rubbish that day, I'm maybe even feeling sick, as soon as I get warmed up, start conditioning, I'm like, okay, this isn't too bad. And often those days that I feel awful and do not want to go into the gym, when I drag myself into that gym, I have one of the best sessions ever. And I'm not sure why that is, but I just know that that is the case. So that's what always has brought me into the gym, even on my worst days.
And, in a sport that a lot of our listeners would be in, triathlon, running, swimming, cycling, the hardest part is actually putting on your gear and getting out the doors. So I guess it's quite similar for a world champion to do the same thing. From a training week perspective then, so you get into the gym, you're doing your routines. I know Luke is there quite a bit with you as well. He's there pretty much every single day. So what does a typical training week look like for you? Like, so you're in Dublin at the moment, Monday to Friday or thereabouts, and training every day in the gym. So talk us through what a typical day or a typical week might look like. And also, I think what would be quite interesting is how do you fuel your performances, like nutrition and food and things like that? I'd be very keen to hear that side of it as well. So maybe we look at the typical training day / week first, and then maybe look at the fueling and nutrition that it takes.
So like ever since I moved to Dublin and I was surrounded by this great team at the Sports Institute in Dublin, they've got the physios, the doctors, all of the nutritionists. Those are facilities that I didn't grow up with. But as I said, before I even came to Dublin, it was almost like a full-time job that I was doing from the age of 10 years old. So it was a very good switch. And I feel like when I made that move to Dublin, my profession was immediately gymnastics. So my training regime still consists of probably about 4 to 5 hours of training every day. But then with added, physiotherapy, I have meetings with my doctors to make sure my health is in good condition. I do a lot of rehabilitation exercises in the fitness gym. There's a lot of strength and conditioning work. So I almost couldn't even tell you how many hours a week I do. I just get the exercises done. If I finish my program early in the gymnastics center, even I'll be done. And that's just the luxury that I have of having this be my job now.
And that's the physical aspect of it, really. So from the mental aspect then of it, how do you train your brain to be able to perform under pressure in front of those big arenas, in front of those big crowds and the big pressurized environments? Do you have a psychologist, psychotherapist? Do you do meditation, mindfulness? What do you do to help you continue to be able to perform at the highest level from a mental perspective?
So I've always labeled the mental aspect of gymnastics, on top of everything. I would almost say that gymnastics is 80% mental and 20% physical. And even with the physical aspect of it, you need that mental capacity to be able to train your body to do that. So I've always labeled the mentality and psychology behind gymnastics very strongly. So I was already on that path of improving my psychology as much as I could, but now I have the luxury of being able to have a psychologist down here in Dublin. I work with Jessie Barr, and it's great just to kind of have that once every week, once every 2 weeks catch up where I can just solidify these ideas that I've had to improve my mentality in this sport. And it's going to be constantly evolving. It's important that I recognize that, and that everybody else recognizes that you're never actually going to make it in your psychological journey. You're never going to be like, oh, well, that's done now. I understand everything about my mind. It's a continual evolution of this process, and that's always going to continually improve, hopefully, in my gymnastics career.
The big question I have for you then as well is what do you do for fun outside of gymnastics?
Yeah, so there's not many tasks that you can choose that aren't physically demanding. I would love to be able to go out and do other sports on top of gymnastics, but I know that coach would be mad. My body would be mad at me as well. But I guess for now, especially in the wintertime, and I live with my teammates down here in Dublin, and we just kind of hop on Xbox now. I try to read as much as I can. Try to educate myself as well, because of course I'm not in school anymore, so it's up to me to try and educate myself. But I enjoy it, I really do.
You mentioned your teammates there, Adam Steele and Eamon Montgomery. For a long time, you trained on your own in the gym. What's it like now going into training or going into work with two guys that are going to push you very hard and you're going to push them as well?
Yeah, it's a great dynamic. I feel like I reap the rewards of training by myself. It's certainly helped my focus towards gymnastics. But now having these two guys, live with me, we're all living the same lifestyle, which is very important. And training together, we all push each other. So if one of us is having a bad day, we're going to be sure to try and push that one person to be the best they can be. And, it goes the same for all of us. So the fact that we all have that same end goal of trying to get to the 2024 Olympics, there's a very special feeling that you get when you train alongside people that have the same goal as you. And I'm glad to be a part of that team.
And Rhys, if I could ask you, what is the biggest lesson you have learned in sport?
Probably that it reflects life a lot more than I would have thought. The things that I learned growing up in sports, and still am learning, I know that I will be able to translate that into regular life as much as I can. Even, I don't know, things with relationships or I don't know, anything pertaining to anything outside the gym. I can learn skills that I've used inside the gym to contribute to that in a positive way. And certainly the fact that sport drags you through the mud, makes your days very challenging, but you always reap the rewards from that in some way.
Do you thrive on those challenges, Rhys? Like, if life was easy, do you think would you enjoy it as much?
Oh, most certainly not. No, I feel like suffering is inevitable in life. And it's about embracing that. Honestly, it's about embracing that suffering, that pain, and knowing that it's going to have that yin and yang sense to it, where the chaos of dragging your body through these very difficult workouts is obviously going to inevitably switch into this positive, into that order of you being physically fit, your mind being physically fit. So every single day I look forward to putting my body and mind through that chaos.
Speaking of chaos, moving off the pommel and on to some of the other aspects of artistic gymnastics. We've seen you do a lot on the floor over the past few weeks and months, especially if people follow you on YouTube and on Instagram. So have you plans for the floor potentially in the future, or is that just another bit of fun in gymnastics, or is there potential there for more competition?
Yeah, a bit of both. I feel like the floor is something that takes my mind off pommel a good bit. It breaks apart that monotonous feeling of just having to go to pommel horse every single day. Even though I still absolutely love it, I just don't want to make myself sick of it. But at the same time, I'm training a floor routine that is up there with the highest difficulty in the world. I'm landing on my bum a lot on floor. I'm getting a newfound respect for floor for sure. But again, that's just part of that process. And who knows, maybe the next Olympic cycle, I think, might be the one for competing floor. But I'm certainly still training it. I'm actually next week going to just compete in a trial alongside the other guys for these World Cups and see what happens.
Is it good for your physical preparation for the pommel to be doing the floor? Like,
Yeah, it's good for general fitness. I'm always really gassed after I do a floor routine. It's very different fitness compared to pommel, where it's more like muscular endurance in your arms. But for in terms of generally being fit and having that cardiovascular endurance, that certainly helps for sure.
and tell me, Rhys, who is your biggest inspiration?
I say my coach and my parents is my go-to answers, but in terms of sport and gymnastics, there's so many names. I mean, in sport, I feel like Katie Taylor is such a great role model for myself. There's somebody that breaks down barriers that nobody has ever reached, and she's the greatest of all time. Like, how is that not talked about more, in my opinion? So Katie for sure, and then in the gymnastics world, the greats, the Kohei Uchimura from Japan. He's now retired, but he won 7 back-to-back world titles, and that's just unheard of. 2 Olympic all-around titles as well. He's the greatest of all time. I actually got the pleasure of training alongside him just before he retired as well, so that was a dream come true.
And Rhys, can I ask you a question about the future beyond participating in the sport of gymnastics? So you're going to be 24 this year, is that right?
Yeah.
So how long does your career potentially last until? Is it into your 30s?
Maybe. I don't want to be that gymnast that retires on an injury for sure, or I want to always be healthy. I know that's a difficult thing to do in gymnastics or in sport in general. That's something that stood out to me at Olympics as well. Anytime I ask people, when you're just saying hello to somebody, you're like, well, how are you? Are you healthy? Everyone is like, no, I'm not healthy. And then listing all of their injuries all over their body. But I don't want to be that person or that gymnast. So we'll see how far my body takes me. I'm thinking low 30s. But then again, the guy that came third on pommel at the World Championships was 38. He was the oldest world gymnastics medalist there's ever been. So he was an exception, maybe.
Do you see yourself as a coach, as a commentator? Where would you like to go? Or have you even thought about the future in sport beyond participation?
Yeah, I would definitely like my chances as a coach. I feel like it would be giving back to the gymnastics community. It would be using my knowledge that I've gained throughout the years. It would almost feel silly of me to go off on a different career path, but just with all of the knowledge I have of gymnastics in general. But I feel like I would really enjoy coaching. Luke has inspired me to do that because I've seen how much he enjoys it, and how much you get from seeing young kids progress, and find the joy in the sport that I love so much as well. I would love to do that, and last year I got my coaching qualifications, so I'm excited for that.
Does that coaching qualification help with your own attitude towards Luke and the coaching he's trying to instill in you and the performances you're trying to get, because maybe the science behind it now from having a coaching qualification?
Yeah, I feel like when it's almost similar to like passing your driving test, where you get your license, but then you actually only start to learn once you start to drive by yourself. I feel like that's what coaching will be like, where you only start to learn once you have gymnasts in front of you, and then you're taking them through that process. That's when you're going to learn the individuals, how important your role is for a coach. I would have seen my coach more than I would have seen my parents growing up. So it's certainly not just a job or even a career. You're their guardian in a sense.
Like a vocation.
Yeah, for sure. So I look forward to that though as well.
Rhys, I've just realised that I did ask you a 2-pronged question when I asked you about your training routine and about your working week in the gym, but we never finished on the question about fueling. So how do you fuel all that training and all that activity that you have in the gym every day?
I mean, a good diet is always going to fuel me well, fuel the mind well too. And that's something that I do work with a nutritionist with. I'm not one to really count calories or get it. I feel like I would get obsessed about it if I was to do that. Then I'm tracking them today actually. So it happens to be just to kind of keep ticking over, but it's something I don't want to do throughout the entire year. So because I feel like I would see too much of an impact on my gymnastics from that. Like, have I fueled enough, or if I've missed something in a meal, then it might play on my mind a bit.
What do you eat on a daily basis then? What would be like your breakfast, lunch and dinner style food?
So breakfast would always be big enough breakfast. I know that a lot of people aren't fans of breakfast, but I'm certainly a fan of it. I would have about 3 eggs in the morning. Even some pancakes, fruits, cup of tea, coffee, and then in the afternoon it would be full meals for lunch and dinner with like rice, a good balance, just a good balance of rice for the carbohydrates, a lot of chicken or meat for the protein, and then a bunch of vegetables mixed in with that. So those 3 things are the guidelines that my nutritionist always gives me, and I'm trying to stick to it as much as possible.
And in the house, who does the cooking between yourself and Adam and Eamon?
Well, we're kind of all like doing our own thing. We're all kind of there's the odd night though that Adam will be like, oh, let me cook this for you, and it's good. So we're not always waiting on one person to cook us meals or anything. And we're trying to improve on our cooking skills. I know I am going into this year. That's going to be one of my resolutions.
And of course, this year is the big year for qualification to Paris 2024. So one or two final questions for you. What would it mean to you to win Olympic gold in Paris?
Everything. That's the end goal in my sports. There's nothing beyond this. The Olympic gold is the pinnacle, the very tippy top. Winning that world championship gold medal is, that's the top also. There's going to be the same competition at that world championships as there is at the Olympic Games, but the Olympic Games only comes around 4 times, I wish, once every 4 years. So it's that added pressure to that moment. And I love the pressure. I love the fact that I get this other opportunity to compete at the Olympic Games, or to first things first, I need to qualify. But that's a top, and I'm certainly aiming for the top.
What will it take to win?
Hopefully everything I've described in this talk, the importance of understanding the failures in gymnastics, dedicating my life to this sport as I have from a very young age. Hopefully that is enough to take me home that gold medal, and then also just performing that routine on the day. Like, ultimately, that's what it is: getting that 60 seconds routine done as clean as I can, performing it as I do in training, and hopefully the results shall follow.
When you say it like it's 60 seconds, that's all it is. Your whole career success depends on 60 seconds.
Yeah, I envy team sports and footballers in a sense, because they can mess up a pass or even a shot on target. If I do that, that's game over for me. There's no second chances. There's no bringing it back. It's that 60 seconds that counts, and I need to make it as perfect as possible.
Going into the Olympics, and we're going to take it that you're going to qualify, going into the Olympics and even into, I suppose, the qualification aspect of it, do you feel as the world champion you've a target on your back now, and that like you're the one that everyone has to beat? Or are you kind of taking it in your stride that like, you're good, you've got a great routine, you just need to continue to show that and continue to get better every day?
Yeah, I mean, I am the standard now for the rest of the world, so that's one thing. It's another thing that I'm really paying attention to it, which I'm not. It ultimately it does just come down to what I do. I can't affect what anybody else does on that pommel horse. I can't affect what the judges do on their score sheets. I can affect what I do though, and that focus just on myself and not caring what anybody else around me is doing is a very important skill that I've only really started to focus on the last half of last year, and I'm certainly taking it into this year and right up until the Olympic Games, where it's just I'm being selfish and focusing on me. I should be a narcissist when it comes to the pommel horse.
Final question: what are you most proud of?
In terms of results, definitely that World Championship gold medal. It was just such a great representation of working our way to the top. We done the Commonwealth Games title, we done the European title, we got to the Olympics, we made the Olympic final. It didn't quite happen. For me, that like World Championship title was the finish to a chapter. I said it at the Gymnastics Ireland Awards that I wasn't quite happy finishing the chapter in my head. The chapter wasn't finished after the Olympic Games there. I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. It felt like I was just like, oh, it just doesn't seem right finishing it there. So after this year, I feel like that was just a nice close to that. I've done it. I've conquered the world. Now let's look at this next chapter. What does it look like? And I can't wait to see what it looks like.
Well, I know I can't wait to see what it looks like. And I know that the majority of the country probably can't wait to see what that looks like as well. A big fan favourite for those who follow gymnastics and those who don't actually follow gymnastics. So you did certainly capture the heart of the nation with your success over recent years. I wish you every success for the future. I can't wait to see what happens over the next few months. And thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Joanne.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. If you would like to hear more great episodes of the podcast, be sure to check them out on our website, www.trytalkingsport.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. We now have over 100 episodes, so there's no shortage of inspiration and motivation to choose from. You can follow all of our activities and podcasts on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and on Instagram. And if you have any feedback or guest suggestions, please pop me an email on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I really would love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for listening, stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.